Hello and welcome. Before you listen any further, pause for a moment and ask yourself one honest question. How many of your decisions today were truly chosen by you, and how many were quietly driven by your emotions? This audiobook is an invitation to step behind the scenes of your inner world, the place where reactions are born, where impulses take control, and where calm is often lost without you noticing. What you are about to hear is not about suppressing feelings or becoming emotionally distant. It is about understanding the invisible forces that shape your behavior, your relationships, and the direction of your life. As you listen, you will begin to recognize patterns you may have lived with for years without questioning. You will notice how ordinary moments carry emotional weight, how small reactions compound into long-term outcomes, and how stability is built quietly, one response at a time. This journey is not rushed, and it does not promise instant change. Instead, it offers clarity, the kind that stays with you long after the words end. Settle in with an open mind. There is nothing you need to prove here, nothing you need to fix immediately. Just listen, observe, and allow a deeper understanding of emotional mastery to unfold naturally. Chapter 1. The moment you realize your emotions are running your life. There is a specific moment that changes everything, though it rarely arrives with drama. It doesn't announce itself loudly or come during a breakdown. Instead, it shows up quietly, often when you are alone with your thoughts. You notice a pattern you can no longer ignore. You realize that your mood decides the tone of your day before you consciously choose anything. That your reactions feel automatic, almost rehearsed, and that, despite your intelligence, experience, or good intentions, your emotions seem to be steering the direction of your life. This realization often begins with exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but emotional fatigue. You feel tired of apologizing for reactions you didn't plan. Tired of replaying conversations in your head, wondering why you said something you didn't mean. Tired of promising yourself that next time you'll stay calm, only to find yourself doing the same thing again. The problem no longer feels external, it feels internal. Most people grow up believing emotions are something that simply happened to them. Anger shows up, so they express it. Anxiety appears, so they avoid what triggers it. Excitement rises, so they act quickly. These responses feel natural, even justified. Over time, reacting becomes a habit, and habits slowly become identity. You start saying things like, "That's just how I am," without realizing that how you are may be the result of years of unexamined emotional patterns. The moment you realize emotions are running your life is the moment you start noticing consequences. You see how a bad mood in the morning ruins an entire day, how a single comment can shift your energy for hours, how stress follows you home, affecting people who had nothing to do with its cause. You begin to recognize that emotions don't just pass through you. They linger, accumulate, and quietly influence decisions. Consider a common scenario. You come home after a difficult day, carrying frustration you never processed. Someone close to you asks a simple question, and you respond sharply. The words come out faster than you intended. In that moment, the reaction feels automatic, almost unavoidable. But later, when the emotion fades, regret settles in. You realize the reaction wasn't about the question at all. It was about everything you never paused to acknowledge. This is how emotional control is lost, not in big moments, but in small, repeated ones. Each unexamined reaction trains the mind to respond the same way next time. Over weeks, months, and years, these reactions shape relationships, opportunities, and self-trust. You may start avoiding situations that trigger certain feelings. You may limit yourself to environments that feel emotionally safe, even if they no longer help you grow. Another realization often follows. Knowledge alone hasn't helped. You know you should be calmer. You know you should communicate better. You know certain reactions are unproductive. Yet knowing hasn't changed doing. This gap between awareness and behavior is where frustration grows. You begin to see that emotional mastery isn't about understanding concepts. It's about changing your relationship with your inner state. At this stage, many people blame willpower. They tell themselves they just need to try harder. But effort applied in the wrong direction creates resistance. The more you fight emotion, the louder it becomes. The more you judge yourself for feeling a certain way, the more power that feeling gains. Control doesn't come from force. It comes from understanding. The turning point arrives when you stop asking, "How do I stop feeling this way?" and start asking, "Why does this feeling take control so quickly?" That question shifts your attention inward. You begin observing emotions instead of identifying with them. You notice how certain thoughts trigger physical sensations, how those sensations push you toward action, and how rarely you pause in between. This pause is where change begins. Not a long pause, just a moment of awareness. You notice irritation rising, you notice your body tense. Instead of reacting immediately, you recognize what's happening. In that recognition, emotion loses some of its urgency. You are no longer inside it, you are looking at it. Real-life examples of this shift are subtle but powerful. Someone notices they always feel defensive during feedback and begins listening instead of interrupting. Another realizes anxiety makes them over-prepare and learns to stop earlier. A third recognizes that sadness leads to withdrawal and chooses connection instead. These are not dramatic transformations. They are quiet adjustments that slowly restore control. The most important realization in this chapter is this: emotions themselves are not the problem. They are signals. They provide information about unmet needs, boundaries, expectations, and values. The problem arises when signals are mistaken for commands, when anger commands action, when fear commands avoidance, when sadness commands isolation. Emotional mastery begins when you stop obeying every signal automatically. This moment of realization is not about becoming emotionally numb or detached. It is about becoming emotionally aware. You don't aim to feel less, you aim to choose more. You learn that you can experience emotion fully without surrendering your behavior to it. This distinction is the foundation of self-control. Once you recognize that emotions have been running your life, responsibility returns to you. Not as blame, but as power. You stop waiting for circumstances to change and start observing how you respond to them. You begin understanding that control is not about suppressing emotion, but about guiding it. This realization doesn't fix everything overnight, but it changes your orientation. You stop seeing emotional reactions as inevitable. You start seeing them as patterns that can be understood, interrupted, and reshaped. And once you see that, you are no longer a passenger in your inner world. You are no longer at the mercy of every feeling that passes through you. You have taken the first step toward emotional mastery, not by changing what you feel, but by reclaiming the choice of how you respond. Chapter 2. Why reacting feels natural but costs you control. Reacting feels natural because it is fast. It requires no preparation, no restraint, and no reflection. Emotion rises, action follows. The entire process happens in seconds, often before you are even aware that a choice existed. This speed creates the illusion of honesty. You feel something, you express it. You assume this immediacy means you are being real. But what feels natural is not always what is effective, and what feels honest is not always what is wise. From an early age, most people are conditioned to react. A child cries when frustrated. A teenager lashes out when misunderstood. An adult withdraws when overwhelmed. These responses are learned, reinforced, and normalized. Over time, reacting becomes the default setting. You stop seeing it as a choice and start seeing it as instinct. The problem is not that reactions exist. The problem is that they begin to replace responses. A reaction is driven by emotion alone. A response includes awareness. This difference is subtle but powerful. When you react, emotion decides timing, tone, and direction. When you respond, emotion is acknowledged but not obeyed. Control lives in that difference. Reacting feels comfortable because it releases pressure. Anger released through words feels relieving in the moment. Avoidance released through distraction feels calming. Defensiveness released through justification feels protective. These releases create short-term relief, which trains the mind to repeat them. But relief is not resolution. Each reaction solves a feeling temporarily while planting the seed for a larger problem later. Consider how often reactions create situations you later regret. A conversation escalates because of a sharp tone. A relationship strains because of words spoken without pause. An opportunity is missed because fear triggered avoidance. In each case, the reaction felt justified at the time. Only later does clarity arrive, often accompanied by frustration with yourself. The cost of reacting is rarely immediate. It accumulates quietly. Trust erodes slowly. Momentum weakens. Confidence in your own stability declines. You begin to notice that people hesitate around you, or that you hesitate around situations that once felt manageable. This erosion does not happen because you are incapable. It happens because reacting has trained your nervous system to prioritize emotional discharge over intentional behavior. Reacting also narrows perspective. When emotion takes over, the mind focuses on the present feeling and ignores the broader context. Long-term consequences fade, nuance disappears. Everything feels urgent. This is why reactions often feel absolute. You feel certain in the moment, only to question yourself later. The certainty was emotional, not rational. Many people defend reacting by calling it authenticity. They believe that filtering emotion means being dishonest. But emotional filtering is not deception. It is discernment. Just as you don't say every thought that crosses your mind, you don't need to act on every feeling that arises. Control does not erase authenticity, it refines it. Another hidden cost of reacting is predictability. When you react consistently, others learn what triggers you. Your patterns become visible. This predictability reduces influence and authority. People who remain calm under pressure are trusted. People who react impulsively are managed around. Over time, reacting limits leadership, respect, and impact. Reacting also affects how you see yourself. Each time you act in a way that contradicts your values, self-trust weakens. You begin doubting your ability to stay composed. This doubt increases anxiety, which increases reactivity. The cycle reinforces itself. You are no longer just reacting to situations, you are reacting to your own lack of control. Breaking this cycle does not require eliminating emotion. It requires slowing the sequence between feeling and action. The smallest pause changes everything. Even a few seconds of awareness interrupts the automatic pattern. In that pause, choice reappears. Real-life examples of this shift are quiet but transformative. Someone feels irritation rise during a conversation and chooses to listen instead of interrupting. Someone feels anxiety before a decision and waits a day instead of reacting immediately. Someone feels the urge to defend themselves and chooses silence instead. These moments do not feel dramatic, but they rebuild control. Responding instead of reacting initially feels uncomfortable. The body is used to release. Holding awareness feels tense at first. But over time, the nervous system adapts. Calm becomes familiar. Pausing becomes natural. What once felt forced becomes instinctive. It is important to understand that reacting is not weakness. It is conditioning. You reacted because your system learned to prioritize emotional relief. Control is not about judging this habit. It is about retraining it. Compassion toward yourself makes the process sustainable. As you become more aware, you start noticing reactions earlier. You feel the physical signs, the tightening chest, the shallow breath, the mental urgency. These signals become cues, not commands. They tell you when to slow down, not when to act. The moment you realize reacting costs control is the moment you start valuing restraint. Not silence, but intentional expression. Not avoidance, but measured action. You begin understanding that power is not in how quickly you respond, but in how deliberately you choose. Over time, responding replaces reacting. Control returns quietly. Conversations become clearer. Decisions become steadier. Regret decreases. Self-trust rebuilds. You stop feeling hijacked by your emotions and start feeling aligned with them. Reacting feels natural because it is familiar. Responding feels powerful because it is chosen. And once you experience the stability that comes from response instead of reaction, control no longer feels like effort. It feels like clarity. Chapter 3. The hidden patterns behind emotional triggers. Emotional triggers rarely announce themselves in advance. They don't arrive with clear explanations or logical timelines. They surface suddenly, often in moments that seem ordinary on the surface. A tone of voice shifts. A message goes unanswered. A small criticism lands harder than expected. And before you can explain it, your emotional state changes. The intensity feels immediate, personal, and out of proportion. What you are reacting to is not just the present moment. It is a pattern that has been rehearsed quietly over time. Triggers are formed where experience meets interpretation. They begin when an emotion is felt strongly, but never fully processed. A moment of embarrassment that was laughed off. A disappointment that was minimized. A boundary that was crossed but never acknowledged. The mind stores these moments as unresolved signals. Later, when a similar situation appears, the emotional response returns instantly, as if time never passed. This is why triggers feel confusing. You know the current situation does not justify the intensity, yet the emotion feels real and overwhelming. Logic tells you to calm down, but logic arrives too late. The body reacts first. The mind follows. Understanding triggers requires recognizing that they are memory-based responses, not present-day evaluations. Most people try to manage triggers by controlling behavior alone. They tell themselves to stay calm, to act differently next time. But without understanding the origin of the trigger, control becomes exhausting. You are constantly managing symptoms without addressing cause. The emotional charge remains intact, waiting for the next activation. Hidden patterns reveal themselves through repetition. You notice that the same types of situations provoke the same reactions. Certain people consistently irritate you. Certain topics consistently make you defensive. Certain forms of uncertainty consistently create anxiety. These repetitions are clues. They point toward emotional associations that were formed long ago. For example, someone who grew up feeling unheard may become triggered by interruption. Even a minor overlap in conversation can feel disrespectful, igniting anger or withdrawal. Another person who experienced instability may react strongly to ambiguity, interpreting delays or changes as threats. These reactions are not about weakness, they are about learned protection. Triggers also shape perception. When activated, they narrow focus. You stop seeing the full context and start seeing through a lens colored by past experience. Neutral events take on emotional meaning. Assumptions replace curiosity. This distortion reinforces the trigger, making it feel justified and self-confirming. The danger of unexamined triggers is not just emotional discomfort, it is behavioral limitation. Triggers influence choices. They determine what conversations you avoid, what risks you refuse, what feedback you resist. Over time, they quietly shape the boundaries of your life. You begin organizing your behavior around emotional landmines rather than values. Recognizing triggers requires slowing down after reactions, not during them. In the moment, emotion is too intense for analysis. Insight comes later, when calm returns. You replay the event and ask different questions. Not who caused this, but what did this touch in me? Not why did they do that, but why did this matter so much to me? This reflection reveals patterns. You start connecting present reactions to past experiences. You notice similarities in emotional tone, not in circumstance. This understanding weakens the trigger's authority. When you see the pattern, the reaction stops feeling inevitable. It becomes understandable. Triggers lose power when they are brought into awareness. The mind no longer treats them as emergencies. The body no longer prepares for threat. You begin recognizing early signs, the tightening, the rush, the mental urgency. These signs become signals to pause, not to react. It is important to note that triggers are not enemies. They are indicators. They show where healing, boundaries, or self-understanding are needed. Ignoring them keeps them active. Understanding them transforms them. As awareness grows, triggers shift. They still appear, but with less intensity. You feel them earlier and recover faster. You respond instead of reacting. This change is gradual, built through repeated recognition, not force. When hidden patterns are uncovered, emotional responses stop feeling mysterious. You no longer feel controlled by reactions you don't understand. Instead, you gain insight into why certain situations affect you deeply. That insight restores choice. Mastery does not mean triggers disappear completely. It means they no longer decide your behavior. You acknowledge the emotion, understand its origin, and choose your response deliberately. This is where emotional intelligence becomes practical. By uncovering the hidden patterns behind emotional triggers, you stop fighting yourself. You begin working with your internal system instead of against it, and in doing so, emotional reactions lose their power to dictate your life, one pattern at a time. Chapter 4: How unmanaged emotions quietly shape your decisions. Most decisions in life are not made in moments of calm reflection. They are made while you are tired, stressed, excited, anxious, or overwhelmed. You may believe you are choosing logically, but emotion is often sitting quietly in the background, influencing direction, speed, and priority. When emotions are unmanaged, they do not announce their presence. They blend into thoughts so seamlessly that their influence feels like reasoning. This is what makes unmanaged emotions so powerful. They do not shout, they whisper. They frame situations before logic arrives. By the time you think you are deciding, the emotional lens is already in place. Consider how stress affects choice. When stress is high, the mind seeks relief, not accuracy. You become more likely to choose options that reduce pressure immediately, even if they create larger problems later. You postpone difficult conversations. You abandon plans that require patience. You distract yourself instead of addressing what matters. None of these choices feel irrational in the moment. They feel necessary. That is how emotion disguises itself as logic. Anxiety operates similarly. It narrows focus to potential threats. When anxiety is unmanaged, decisions become defensive. You choose safety over growth, familiarity over possibility. You avoid uncertainty, not because it is dangerous, but because it feels uncomfortable. Over time, this avoidance shapes a smaller life. Opportunities disappear not because they were unavailable, but because they were emotionally intolerable. Excitement, often seen as positive, can be just as distorting. When unmanaged excitement leads to overcommitment, you say yes too quickly. You underestimate effort. You assume momentum will last forever. Later, when energy fades, you feel trapped by commitments made under emotional momentum rather than thoughtful evaluation. Unmanaged emotions also influence timing. You act too fast when you should wait. You wait too long when you should act. Urgency becomes exaggerated. Delays feel personal. Neutral situations feel loaded with meaning. These distortions push decisions out of alignment with values. What makes this especially difficult is that unmanaged emotional decisions still feel intentional. You can explain them. You can justify them. You can create stories around them. But justification is not the same as clarity. Many people look back on past choices and say, "I don't know why I did that." The reason is not mystery. The reason is emotion that was never acknowledged. Over time, emotional decision-making creates patterns. You notice recurring outcomes, similar conflicts, similar regrets, similar missed chances. The surface details change, but the emotional process stays the same. This repetition is not bad luck. It is unexamined emotion repeating itself through different situations. Relationships are often the first area where this shows up. Unmanaged emotions shape how you communicate, what you tolerate, and what you avoid. You may agree when you want to say no. You may withdraw when you want connection. You may escalate when calm discussion would serve you better. Each choice feels justified emotionally, yet slowly erodes trust and understanding. Career decisions are also heavily influenced. Frustration leads to quitting prematurely. Fear leads to staying too long. Comparison leads to chasing paths that do not align with you. Burnout leads to impulsive changes rather than strategic ones. Again, the issue is not lack of intelligence. It is lack of emotional regulation. The most subtle impact of unmanaged emotions is on self-image. Each decision you regret weakens confidence. You begin doubting your judgment. This doubt creates more emotional instability, which leads to more emotionally driven decisions. The cycle tightens quietly. Managing emotions does not mean removing them from decisions. It means giving them a proper role. Emotions provide information, not instructions. They tell you what matters, not what to do. When emotions are managed, they inform decisions without controlling them. The shift begins with slowing down decision making when emotion is high. Not avoiding decisions, but delaying action long enough for perspective to return. Even short pauses allow the emotional wave to pass. In that space, values can speak. As emotional awareness improves, you begin noticing emotional states before deciding. You ask yourself simple questions. Am I tired? Am I anxious? Am I reacting to something unrelated? These questions do not solve the problem instantly, but they reduce emotional authority. Gradually, decisions change. They become calmer, more consistent, less reactive. You stop swinging between extremes. You stop making promises you can't keep and avoiding actions you know are necessary. Life begins to feel less chaotic, not because circumstances improved, but because internal regulation increased. Unmanaged emotions quietly shape decisions because they operate invisibly. Once they are seen, their influence weakens. You reclaim authorship over your choices. And when decisions are guided by awareness instead of impulse, outcomes begin to align more closely with who you intend to be. This is not control through force. It is control through understanding. And that understanding transforms decisions from emotional reactions into deliberate steps forward. Chapter 5. The difference between feeling and being controlled. One of the most important distinctions in emotional mastery is also one of the least understood. The difference between experiencing an emotion and being controlled by it. Most people assume these two are the same. They believe that if they feel something strongly, they must act on it. This belief turns emotions into authority figures rather than internal signals. And once emotions gain authority, control quietly slips away. Feeling an emotion is a natural human response. It happens automatically. You do not choose when sadness arrives, when irritation surfaces, or when fear appears. These responses are part of being alive. Being controlled by an emotion, however, is something entirely different. Control happens when the emotion dictates your behavior without your consent. When anger decides your words, when fear decides your silence, when frustration decides your withdrawal. This confusion begins early. Many people grow up being rewarded or punished based on emotional expression. Some learn that anger gets attention. Others learn that showing emotion leads to rejection. Over time, emotions become linked to behavior patterns. Feeling and acting become fused. The space between them disappears. When this fusion exists, emotion feels urgent. You feel compelled to do something immediately. The body tightens. The mind races. Action feels necessary. In reality, this urgency is learned, not required. Emotions create sensations, not deadlines. The sense that you must act right now is often an illusion. Being controlled by emotion means losing access to choice. You may later say, "I didn't mean to react like that," or "I don't know why I did that." These statements reveal that behavior occurred without conscious direction. Control was temporarily handed over to an internal state. This loss of control often creates shame. People criticize themselves for reactions they didn't want. They promise to do better next time. But without understanding the difference between feeling and control, the pattern repeats. Shame adds pressure. Pressure increases emotional intensity. The cycle strengthens. Understanding this difference changes everything. You realize that emotions can exist without commanding action. You can feel anger without speaking harshly. You can feel fear without avoiding. You can feel sadness without collapsing inward. The feeling remains, but behavior becomes optional. This is not suppression. Suppression attempts to eliminate emotion. Suppression says, "I shouldn't feel this." That resistance often amplifies emotion. Control, on the other hand, allows emotion to be present without obedience. You acknowledge the feeling without surrendering direction. Real-life examples illustrate this clearly. Someone feels insulted during a conversation. Instead of reacting defensively, they notice the sensation and choose to ask a question. Another feels anxiety before a decision. Instead of backing out, they pause, breathe, and proceed thoughtfully. In both cases, the emotion existed, but control remained intact. The key skill here is tolerance. You learn to tolerate emotional discomfort without immediate action. This tolerance is not passive. It requires attention and restraint. At first, it feels unnatural. The body expects release. Over time, tolerance grows. The nervous system adapts. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. When you stop being controlled by emotion, your sense of identity shifts. You no longer define yourself by what you feel in the moment. You define yourself by how you choose to act. This creates stability. You become predictable to yourself, even when emotions fluctuate. This distinction also improves relationships. Others experience you as steady. They trust your responses. They feel safer communicating honestly. Conflict becomes easier to navigate because emotions are no longer weapons or shields. They are simply information being shared. being controlled by emotion often leads to extremes. You say too much or too little. You commit too quickly or withdraw entirely. When control returns, behavior becomes balanced. You express yourself without escalation, you listen without defensiveness, you act without urgency. Importantly, emotional control does not eliminate intensity. You may still feel deeply. The difference is that intensity no longer hijacks behavior. You remain present instead of reactive. This presence creates clarity. The practice of separating feeling from control develops gradually. It begins with noticing moments when emotion pushes you toward action. You don't stop the feeling, you slow the response. Each successful pause strengthens the separation. Over time, this separation becomes natural. You stop feeling attacked by your own emotions. You stop fearing them. They become signals you respect, not forces you obey. This relationship with emotion restores autonomy. The difference between feeling and being controlled is the difference between experiencing life and being driven by it. When you learn this distinction, you regain authorship over your actions. Emotions no longer run your life, they inform it. And that shift quietly transforms how you move through every situation that follows. Chapter 6. Training emotional awareness without suppressing yourself. Emotional awareness is often misunderstood. Many people believe that becoming emotionally aware means becoming emotionally restrained, quiet, or distant. Others assume it requires constant self-analysis or emotional exposure. In reality, emotional awareness is neither suppression nor indulgence. It is the skill of noticing what you feel as you feel it, without immediately trying to change it or escape it. Suppression happens when emotion is judged as unacceptable. You tell yourself you shouldn't feel angry, anxious, jealous, or overwhelmed. You push the feeling down and continue functioning. On the surface, this may look like control. Internally, it creates pressure. Suppressed emotions do not disappear, they wait. They resurface later as irritability, exhaustion, sudden outbursts, or emotional numbness. What is ignored does not resolve, it accumulates. Training emotional awareness works in the opposite direction. Instead of pushing emotion away, you bring attention toward it. You acknowledge its presence without amplifying it. This approach feels counterintuitive at first because awareness requires stillness, and stillness can feel uncomfortable when emotions are active. But this discomfort is temporary. Awareness reduces intensity over time, while suppression increases it. Emotional awareness begins in the body, not the mind. Before you can label what you feel, your body has already responded. Your shoulders tighten. Your breath becomes shallow. Your chest feels heavy. These physical sensations are early signals. When you learn to notice them, you catch emotions before they escalate into behavior. For example, instead of realizing you're angry after you've spoken harshly, you notice heat rising in your chest while the conversation is still unfolding. Instead of recognizing anxiety after you've avoided something, you feel the tension in your stomach as hesitation appears. These moments are not about stopping the emotion. They are about witnessing it. Awareness creates distance. When you notice emotion as an experience rather than an identity, it stops feeling overwhelming. You are no longer angry. You are noticing anger. This shift may seem subtle, but it changes your relationship with emotion entirely. You stop being inside the feeling and start observing it. Many people fear that awareness will intensify emotion. They worry that paying attention will make it worse. The opposite is usually true. When emotions are acknowledged without resistance, they move more freely. They rise, peak, and fall naturally. It is resistance that traps them. Training this awareness does not require dramatic situations. It is built in ordinary moments, waiting in line, listening to feedback, feeling impatience during a delay. Each moment offers an opportunity to notice without reacting. You practice staying present while emotion passes through. Language also matters. When you stop saying, "I am stressed," and start saying, "I'm noticing stress," you shift power. The emotion becomes an event, not a definition. This language reinforces awareness without suppression. Another important part of training is curiosity. Instead of asking why you feel a certain way, you ask how it feels, where it sits in the body, how it changes with breath. Curiosity replaces judgment. Judgment fuels resistance. Curiosity softens it. Emotional awareness also improves communication. When you are aware of what you feel, you express it more clearly. You stop projecting emotion onto others. You speak from experience rather than accusation. This reduces conflict and builds understanding. Over time, awareness creates emotional resilience. You trust your ability to feel without being overwhelmed. You stop fearing emotional states. Fear of emotion often causes more damage than emotion itself. When fear disappears, regulation becomes easier. This training is not about perfection. You will still react at times. Awareness does not eliminate mistakes. It shortens recovery. Instead of spiraling, you return to balance faster. You learn from experience rather than being defined by it. As awareness strengthens, emotions lose their urgency. You no longer feel pressured to act immediately. Space opens between sensation and response. That space is where choice lives. Training emotional awareness without suppressing yourself is a quiet discipline. It does not announce progress. Others may not notice immediately, but internally, life feels different. You are no longer fighting your emotions or surrendering to them. You are listening to them. And when emotions are heard instead of silenced, they stop demanding attention. They become guides rather than obstacles. This is how emotional awareness becomes a source of stability, clarity, and self-trust, without sacrificing authenticity or depth. Chapter 70. Turning emotional pressure into inner stability. Emotional pressure is unavoidable. It builds quietly through responsibilities, expectations, uncertainty, and constant demands on attention. Most people experience this pressure as something to escape. They look for relief, distraction, or release. But emotional mastery begins when pressure is no longer treated as an enemy and instead becomes something that can be absorbed, processed, and transformed into stability. Pressure itself is not destructive. What destabilizes people is the absence of an internal structure strong enough to hold it. When inner stability is weak, even small pressures feel overwhelming. When stability is strong, even intense situations become manageable. The difference is not circumstance. It is internal conditioning. Many people confuse stability with calm environments. They believe they will feel stable once life slows down, once problems resolve, once pressure disappears. This belief keeps them waiting. Stability that depends on external calm is fragile. The moment conditions change, balance collapses again. Inner stability is different. It is the ability to remain centered while pressure exists. It is built through repeated exposure, not avoidance. Each time you face emotional strain without collapsing or reacting impulsively, stability strengthens. This process is gradual but powerful. Pressure often shows up as urgency, the feeling that something must be solved immediately. That delay equals failure. That discomfort cannot be tolerated. When urgency takes over, thinking narrows. You rush decisions, you speak without reflection, you abandon values for relief. Inner stability interrupts this urgency. It slows perception, it restores perspective. Consider how pressure affects behavior. Under emotional load, some people overwork, others withdraw. Some become irritable, others become silent. These responses are attempts to manage pressure, not resolve it. They reduce sensation temporarily, but they do not increase capacity. Turning pressure into stability requires a different approach. Instead of asking how to remove pressure, you ask how to increase your ability to hold it. This shift changes behavior. You stop chasing relief and start building resilience. One way stability develops is through grounding. When pressure rises, attention often jumps into the future, imagining consequences, outcomes, and risks. Grounding brings attention back to the present, not to deny the future, but to anchor the nervous system. Simple awareness of breath, posture, or physical contact with the environment reduces emotional escalation. Another key element is emotional containment. This does not mean hiding emotion. It means allowing emotion to exist without spilling into behavior prematurely. You hold the feeling long enough to understand it. This containment builds trust within yourself. You learn that you can feel pressure without losing control. Real life examples of inner stability are subtle. A person receives criticism and listens fully before responding. Another faces uncertainty and continues routine instead of spiraling. A third experiences disappointment but maintains composure rather than withdrawing. These moments look ordinary from the outside, but internally they represent strength. Stability also grows through consistency. Predictable routines, deliberate pauses, and intentional boundaries reduce emotional volatility. When your internal environment is orderly, pressure has less impact. You are not constantly reacting because you are not constantly destabilized. Importantly, inner stability does not eliminate emotion. You still feel stress, concern, and tension. The difference is that these feelings no longer dictate behavior. They coexist with clarity. You experience pressure without becoming it. As stability increases, recovery time shortens. Emotional waves still rise, but they pass more quickly. You return to balance faster. This resilience builds confidence. You stop fearing emotional strain because you trust your ability to handle it. Pressure also becomes informative. Instead of signaling danger, it signals importance. You learn to differentiate between meaningful challenges and unnecessary stress. This discernment improves decision-making and conserves energy. Over time, people with inner stability become anchors in unstable environments. Others sense their calm, trust increases, communication improves. Stability becomes influential, not just personal. Turning emotional pressure into inner stability is not about toughness. It is about adaptability. You bend without breaking. You respond without reacting. You remain present without collapsing inward. As this chapter closes, understand this clearly. Pressure will always exist. Life does not remove it. But you can change how pressure lives inside you. When stability grows from within, pressure stops being a threat and becomes a training ground, quietly strengthening you every time you choose presence over panic. Chapter 80. How self-control is built in ordinary moments. Self-control is often imagined as something dramatic, resisting major temptations, staying disciplined under extreme pressure, or making heroic choices in critical moments. In reality, self-control is built quietly, far away from those dramatic situations. It is shaped in ordinary moments, in choices so small they barely register as decisions. These moments, repeated daily, determine how much control you truly have when it matters. Most people believe they lack self-control because they fail in big situations. But the truth is simpler and more uncomfortable. Self-control is weak in big moments because it was never practiced in small ones. You cannot suddenly become composed under pressure if you regularly surrender control when things feel easy. Ordinary moments reveal your habits. How you respond when something mildly annoys you. Whether you finish what you start when no one is watching. How you speak when you feel slightly irritated. These situations feel insignificant, which is exactly why they matter. They train your nervous system and your mind without resistance. Self-control begins with awareness, not restriction. You start by noticing impulses instead of immediately obeying them. The urge to check something, the urge to interrupt, the urge to escape discomfort. Each time you notice an impulse and pause, even briefly, you strengthen control. The pause is the practice. Many people assume self-control means forcing yourself to act against desire. That approach rarely lasts. Sustainable self-control is built by understanding desire, not fighting it. When you recognize why an impulse exists, it loses urgency. You stop reacting automatically and start choosing deliberately. Consider how people handle minor discomfort. A slight boredom leads to distraction. A small delay leads to frustration. A minor inconvenience leads to complaint. These reactions feel harmless, but they condition the mind to avoid discomfort at all costs. Over time, tolerance shrinks. Self-control weakens not because challenges grew, but because tolerance disappeared. Building self-control in ordinary moments means allowing mild discomfort to exist without immediate relief. Staying with a task a little longer, sitting with silence instead of reaching for stimulation, completing something even when motivation dips. These acts are not impressive, but they are powerful. Real-life examples show this clearly. One person scrolls the moment attention drops. Another finishes the page. One avoids a difficult message. Another responds thoughtfully. Over months and years, these differences shape reliability, focus, and confidence. The outcomes look like personality, but they are trained behavior. Self-control also develops through consistency. When your actions match your intentions repeatedly, trust forms internally. You begin to believe yourself. This internal trust reduces inner conflict. You no longer negotiate with every impulse because your mind knows you follow through. Another important aspect is emotional self-control. This does not mean suppressing emotion. It means choosing how emotion is expressed. You notice irritation before it turns into sharp words. You feel disappointment without turning it into withdrawal. This regulation keeps relationships and decisions stable. Ordinary moments also teach patience, waiting without agitation, listening without planning your response, allowing outcomes to unfold without constant interference. These moments slow the mind and strengthen control subtly but steadily. Importantly, self-control grows through repetition, not intensity. You do not need extreme discipline. You need consistent, moderate effort. Like strengthening a muscle, small repetitions done daily produce lasting strength. As self-control improves, behavior becomes simpler. You stop relying on motivation, you act based on alignment. Choices feel lighter because they are no longer debated internally. This reduces mental fatigue and increases clarity. Self-control also protects energy. When impulses no longer hijack attention, focus deepens. Tasks take less effort because resistance decreases. You move through days with more steadiness and less emotional drag. Over time, the accumulation of these ordinary moments creates extraordinary stability. When pressure arrives, you do not panic because your system is trained. You have practiced control when stakes were low, so it holds when stakes rise. Self-control is not a trait you are born with. It is a skill you build quietly. Every ordinary moment gives you the chance to strengthen it or weaken it. The difference is awareness. By choosing presence over impulse in small moments, you prepare yourself for larger ones. And when those larger moments arrive, self-control no longer feels like effort, it feels like who you are. Chapter 9. Emotional discipline and the power of calm thinking. Emotional discipline is not about becoming cold, distant, or unfeeling. It is about creating enough inner stability that your emotions no longer control the direction of your life. Calm thinking does not erase emotion. It places emotion in its proper role. Instead of leading every decision, emotion becomes information. And this shift changes everything. Most people experience emotions as commands. When anger appears, they react. When anxiety rises, they avoid. When excitement hits, they rush forward without reflection. Over time, this reactive pattern creates instability. Life begins to feel unpredictable, not because events are chaotic, but because internal responses are. Emotional discipline begins when you stop treating emotions as instructions and start treating them as signals. A signal asks to be examined, not obeyed. Calm thinking is the space where that examination happens. It allows you to ask what the emotion is pointing toward instead of immediately acting on it. Calm thinking does not come from suppressing emotion. Suppression creates internal pressure that eventually explodes. Discipline is different. It acknowledges emotion fully but delays response. This delay, sometimes only a few seconds, is powerful. It breaks the automatic loop between feeling and action. Real-life situations reveal this clearly. Someone criticizes you. An undisciplined response lashes out or shuts down. A disciplined response pauses, evaluates intent, and chooses words carefully. The emotional experience is the same. The outcome is entirely different. Calm thinking also protects long-term goals. Strong emotions narrow perspective. When emotions spike, the future fades. Only immediate relief matters. Emotional discipline keeps the future visible even when the present feels intense. This ability prevents impulsive decisions that feel justified in the moment but costly later. Another key element of emotional discipline is familiarity with discomfort. Calm thinkers do not panic when discomfort arises. They recognize it as temporary. This recognition reduces urgency. When urgency fades, clarity returns. Calm thinking thrives in environments where discomfort is tolerated instead of escaped. Many people believe calm thinkers are detached or indifferent. In reality, they are deeply engaged. Their engagement is simply not chaotic. They feel fully, but they respond selectively. This selectivity preserves energy and sharpens judgment. Emotional discipline is built through repeated exposure to manageable stress. Each time you experience emotion without reacting immediately, regulation improves. Over time, your nervous system learns that emotion does not equal danger. This learning reduces reactivity naturally. Calm thinking also improves communication. When emotions are regulated, words are chosen deliberately. Listening improves. Misunderstandings decrease. Relationships stabilize. Emotional discipline creates psychological safety for yourself and for others. Another powerful effect is decision quality. Calm thinkers gather more information. They weigh trade-offs realistically. They are less influenced by fear-driven assumptions or excitement-driven exaggeration. Decisions become grounded instead of emotional. Calm thinking does not mean indecision. In fact, it often leads to faster decisions because clarity replaces inner conflict. When emotions are regulated, fewer mental resources are spent negotiating with yourself. Action becomes cleaner and more confident. There is also a compounding effect. Each calm response reinforces self-trust. You begin to believe in your ability to handle situations gracefully. This confidence reduces anxiety before it arises. Emotional discipline becomes self-reinforcing. Importantly, calm thinking is not passive acceptance. It does not tolerate harm or injustice. It simply chooses response over reaction. Boundaries are set thoughtfully instead of explosively. Strength is expressed without chaos. Over time, emotional discipline reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as emotionally volatile or overwhelmed. You begin seeing yourself as steady. This identity influences future behavior. You approach challenges with composure instead of fear. Calm thinking also creates resilience. When setbacks occur, disciplined minds recover faster. They analyze instead of spiral. They adjust instead of collapse. This resilience allows consistent progress even in uncertain conditions. Emotional discipline is not learned once. It is practiced daily. Every conversation, delay, disappointment, and challenge becomes training. With each practice, calm thinking strengthens. Eventually, calm becomes your default, not because emotions disappear, but because they no longer dominate. You feel deeply without losing direction. You think clearly without disconnecting from experience. This is the quiet power of emotional discipline. It does not announce itself. It simply changes outcomes, one composed decision at a time. Chapter 1. Living with emotional mastery in a chaotic world. Emotional mastery is not achieved by escaping chaos. It is achieved by learning how to remain centered while chaos exists around you. The world does not slow down when you gain control over your emotions. Noise continues, pressure remains, uncertainty persists. What changes is how you stand within it. Most people wait for life to become calm before they feel stable. Emotional mastery reverses this expectation. Stability is built internally first. Once it exists, external chaos loses its power to shake you. Situations that once overwhelmed you begin to feel manageable, not because they are smaller, but because you are steadier. Living with emotional mastery means understanding that emotions will always arise. Stress will visit. Frustration will appear. Fear will surface at times. Mastery does not remove these experiences. It changes your relationship with them. You stop identifying with every emotion as if it defines you. Instead, emotions become passing states rather than permanent truths. In a chaotic world, emotional mastery becomes a form of leadership, even in your own life. When others react impulsively, you respond thoughtfully. When panic spreads, you maintain clarity. This presence creates influence without force. People sense stability even when you say little. Real-life moments reveal this clearly. A crisis unfolds at work. Voices rise, deadlines tighten, someone reacts emotionally, making rushed decisions that create more problems. Another person slows down, prioritizes, and communicates calmly. The second person does not ignore urgency. They manage it. This ability becomes invaluable in environments where pressure is constant. Emotional mastery also protects your mental energy. Chaos drains people because they fight it internally. They resist reality instead of working within it. Mastery accepts what is happening without surrendering control. Acceptance reduces internal friction. With less friction, energy is preserved for action. Another aspect of emotional mastery is discernment. Not every emotion deserves the same level of attention. Not every problem requires your full engagement. Mastery teaches you where to invest emotional energy and where to remain neutral. This discernment prevents burnout and emotional exhaustion. Living this way also reshapes your sense of self. You stop seeing yourself as fragile or easily shaken. You begin trusting your ability to remain composed regardless of circumstances. This trust builds confidence that is quiet but unshakable. You no longer fear emotional waves because you know how to ride them. Emotional mastery also improves decision-making under pressure. When chaos accelerates, many people lose perspective. They confuse urgency with importance. A regulated mind keeps priorities intact. It distinguishes between what feels loud and what truly matters. This clarity prevents costly mistakes. In relationships, emotional mastery reduces conflict. You stop escalating tension unconsciously. You listen more carefully. You respond instead of defend. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you address issues without letting emotion hijack communication. Boundaries become firm but calm. Over time, emotional mastery creates a sense of inner quiet that travels with you. Even in noisy environments, there is a stillness inside. This stillness is not emptiness, it is control. It allows you to think clearly, act deliberately, and recover quickly. Living with this mastery also brings freedom. You are no longer a prisoner of moods or circumstances. You can feel deeply without being derailed. You can experience pressure without collapsing. This freedom allows you to engage fully with life rather than constantly managing internal chaos. Emotional mastery does not mean perfection. There will still be moments when emotions rise unexpectedly. What changes is recovery. You regain balance faster. You learn from reactions instead of judging them. Each moment becomes feedback rather than failure. As this journey concludes, remember this: mastering your emotions is not about controlling the world. It is about controlling your response to it. When your inner world becomes stable, the outer world loses its power to dominate your experience. If this audiobook helped you gain clarity, awareness, and inner strength, take a moment to support the journey. Like this audiobook, share it with someone who could benefit from emotional clarity, and subscribe for more content designed to build calm, control, and confidence in a noisy world. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for choosing to invest in your inner growth.